As some of you may be aware, this year the nation of the United States of America will turn 250 years old. And I was wondering, just a brief show of hands, does everyone here have a favorite founding father of the U.S.? Founding father. Sorry. It was a sexist world back then. So much has changed. Just quick show of hands. For who finds Benjamin Franklin the most interesting founding father? Or let me put it another way, the one that you would most like to have as a dinner guest. I'm gonna call that unanimous. That's about right, even though he has not had a Tony-winning musical written about him. I think if he had died in a duel and had a musical about him, it would definitely be unanimous across the board. But there is a problem in talking with Ben Franklin, because the big issue is, what do I say about Benjamin Franklin? Not because there's little to say, but because there is far too much. This is a titan, a Renaissance man. He's our Leonardo da Vinci combined with our media baron, probably America's first great media baron. So since there is this superfluity of information about this person, so many achievements, I'm going to focus on the parts of his character that relate the most immediately to my own current efforts. And these are his use of narrative and how that relates to the scientific method. He was a scientist through and through, and I think that informed every aspect of his life. So the way I put it, there are three great limbs growing out of the same trunk and branching off in different directions from a common source. Franklin, the scientist, first and foremost, branching off into Franklin, the inventor. Franklin, the social engineer, branching off into Franklin, the statesman, and Franklin, the diplomat. And then Franklin, the storyteller, branching off into Franklin, the businessman, but informing everything that he did in the role as a statesman and a diplomat, and thus in the creation of America itself. The scientist develops a question about some phenomenon that they do not fully understand. That's why they have a question. What is lightning? They postulate an answer. Design experiments to test the postulate and then feed the results of those experiments into further explorations. The social engineer identifies a problem, describes the problem, puts the problem into context of the greater community, envisions a possible solution, marshals public will towards cooperative efforts to implement that solution, and then makes adjustments based on the real-world outcomes. Also Franklin. The storyteller I focused on in this last branch of the Franklin tree, because I've spent the last few weeks and months working on telling Franklin's story in our upcoming production at Lantern Theater. So here's the shameless plug. The playwright, Lloyd Suh, has written this play, Franklinland, which we're going to be putting on at Lantern Theater in about 2 weeks' time. And along the way, we're not just telling Franklin's story, but we're telling Lloyd's story of Franklin, his entire creation of Franklin. And we're creating Frank X's story, because he's playing Franklin, and along the way, Dave Johnson's story, who's playing Franklin's son, who has his own idea of what his father's all about, and thrown into the mix is my own interpretation of who Franklin was. And they're all different. It's Franklin's within Franklin's within Franklin's, or as Tom Stoppard would say, Franklin's all the way down. So he is a protean figure, and he changes shape depending on who's observing him and from which angle they're viewing him. What is Franklin, after all? He was somebody who created order out of chaos. and created meaning out of inchoate potential. His personal life, as you will see if you see our play, was a different matter altogether. It was in many ways a creation of one of the most chaotic home situations you could possibly imagine. But at the core of his many ideas, each of which gave rise to extraordinary creative endeavors, was a common impulse to arrange the world, an ordered world out of the chaotic noise and the random experiences of life into material that in some way could give meaning to it all. So let's go back to the early days and focus on Franklin the storyteller. And so this is part of my own process that I go through all the time. I ask, what is a story? What is it after all? It's not just a series of events any more than a meal is a bunch of random ingredients. So let's posit that it is a framework that takes this series of events, any series of events occurring to one or more characters, and creates meaning from the randomness of it all. Because meaning is to stories what cooking is to food. It takes indigestible lumps of matter and makes them not only appetizing to the senses, but nourishing to the body, allowing us to absorb the vital nutrients from them. Now, when the raw components of life's event are woven into a good story, they become fixed in memory as something both novel and interesting, but also instantly recognizable as true to life. So the story becomes part of our broader pool of accumulated life experiences and accumulated knowledge, even though we did not experience its events firsthand. And a great story imparts new context to our own experiences and enables us to better interpret our new experiences and craft our life's narrative, craft our own life's narrative in such a way that gives us not only meaning, but wisdom. So, how do we do this? Why do we do this? One of the most fundamental things about how the human brain works is that it is a pattern recognition machine at one level, after another, after another, after another. The chaos and noise that a newborn infant is subject to is slowly replaced by the clarity of sight and hearing and touch, all of which enable us to function in the world. This is the brain teasing patterns out of raw materials, and it starts automatically when we're born, and it goes on until, instead of white noise and blinding light, we see objects and we hear distinct sounds. When this bewilderment gives way to the clarity of perception, then to the imagination of things beyond our sight and the ability to act, we are not only seeing what is apparent in the world around us, but we are imagining unseen things over the horizon and into the future. All of these human abilities rely on our ability to accurately recognize patterns in the environment. Also social patterns, material patterns, meteorological patterns, mechanical patterns, etc. Once we start to see them here and there, we start to see them everywhere. So, we take the elements of the scientific method. Observer meets phenomenon. The observer is intrigued. Why does it happen this way? What is it? The observer imagines a possible explanation. The observer designs an experiment to see if the explanation is plausible. This is Ben Franklin with his son. His son is actually 21 at the time of this experiment, but usually depicted as a boy. This is one of the most interesting experiments in the history of humankind, and it happens to have taken place right on the location of the theater where we're going to be performing our play. Or at least so the plaque tells us, so that's the story I'm going with. So the observer checks the results of the experiment, takes in new information, feeds it into the design of the next experiment. Everything starts as imagination, and everything ends up as hard information, data. The successful scientist always follows the data, and the failed one keeps trying to prove the theory that they have become attached to, no matter what the evidence is. Which is probably a good explanation of the political process. Now, this method is a process that runs parallel to the way that we create stories. An event emerges, it's novel, it's notable in some way that makes us wonder at it because it defies immediate categorization. We're not sure what to make of this new thing, so we can't help but try to fit it somehow into the framework of what we now know, and we begin to craft a narrative around it. Here's the flaw. If we do not have an objective, accurate picture of this new thing or event that is driven by evidence, we will nonetheless create a narrative or picture for ourselves based only on our imagination. And we will likely treat this imagined truth, this imagined narrative, as the truth. We cannot help but do this. The human mind is not generally capable of hosting open questions for too long. Some of us have a high tolerance for ambiguity. Some of us have no tolerance for it whatsoever. But everyone's tolerance for ambiguity is limited. And since we cannot ever fully observe an event from all possible perspectives, we can never have a full picture of what might enable a full objective picture that might enable us to grasp the complete truth of an event or phenomenon, much less of a person. So we will inevitably begin to deploy our imaginative powers to fill in the missing bits, and we will probably be completely unaware of when we begin to do so. So we cannot really know the full content of human motivations entirely any more than we can know the position of and the momentum of a subatomic particle. But that's a completely different play that we did years ago.
Friends knows which play.
Yeah, more in the Q&A. So the scientific method depends on the observer being an impartial witness. In narrative, the observing principle is replaced by character and need not be impartial. In fact, the nearer that characters in a story are to actual flawed human beings, the more relevant and relatable the story becomes to the audience. Now, it is precisely here that the genius of Franklin first presents itself in the character of Silence Dogood. Yes?
We have a bunch of slides.
Oh, yes,
before you get to Silence Dogood.
Oh, yes, by all means. So let's round out the science bit before we move on to straight up narrative. The stove. The glass harmonica.
Will we see that in the play?
You will. Not that one. Okay.
He invented swim fins.
Yes, he did invent swim fins. It's sort of much in the same way that Leonardo da Vinci invented the helicopter. The lightning rod found a useful way to follow up on his kite experiment. And do we have more?
Yeah, hold on. Oh, sorry, it's not advancing.
Yes. Bifocals. And of course, you will all recognize the flexible urinary catheter.
Will also make an appearance
which
in the play.
Which will make an appearance in the play, scene 3, I believe. And okay, this is. Let's keep this here for a few seconds because I'd like everyone to take in this picture. Now, more on this in a bit. So, Silence Dogood.
Oh, wait. We were going to start in Boston.
I believe that's an Apple ad, by the way.
We were going to start in Boston, but your mother already covered that.
Okay. Here we are with Silence Dogood's letter.
Before we leave Boston.
Before we leave Boston, we are, so this is, I believe Franklin at this point is about 15, and he's been agitating to his brother to let him do more than just print the papers, let him do some put out some copy here. His brother says no. And at one point, a letter arrives at the New England Current. To the author of the New England Current, sir, it may not be improper in the first place to inform your readers that I intend once a fortnight to present them, with the help of this paper, with a short epistle which I presume will add somewhat to their entertainment. And since it is observed that the generality of people nowadays are unwilling to commend or dispraise what they read until they are in some measure informed who or what the author of it is, whether he be poor or rich, young or old, a scholar or a leather-aproned man, etc., and give their opinion of the performance according to the knowledge which they have of the author's circumstance, it may not be amiss to begin with a short account of my past life and my present condition, that the reader may not be at a loss to judge whether or not my lucubrations are worth his reading. At the time of my birth, my parents were on shipboard on their way from London to New England. My entrance into this troublesome world was attended by the death of my father, a misfortune which, though I was not then capable of knowing, I shall never be able to forget. For as he, poor man, stood upon the deck, rejoicing at my birth, a merciless wave entered the ship, and in one moment carried him beyond reprieve. Thus was my first day, which I saw the last that was seen by my father, and thus was my disconsolate mother at once made both parent and a widow. When we arrived at Boston, I was put to nurse at a country place at a small distance from the town where I went to school, until I was bound out to apprentice, that I might no longer be a charge upon my indigent mother, who was put to hard shifts for a living. My master was a country minister, a pious, good-natured young man, and a bachelor. He labored with all his might to instill virtuous and godly principles into my tender soul, well knowing that it was a most suitable time to make deep and lasting impressions on the mind, while it was yet untainted with vice, free and unbiased. He endeavored that I might be instructed in all the knowledge and learning which it was necessary for our sex to have, and denied me no accomplishment that could possibly be attended in a country place, such as all sorts of needlework, writing, arithmetic, etc. Before I had lived quite 2 years with this reverend gentleman, my indulgent mother departed this life, leaving me, as it were, to myself, having no relation on earth within my knowledge. I will not abuse your patience with a tedious recital of all the frivolous accidents of my life that happened from this time until I arrived at the years of discretion, only to inform you that I lived a cheerful country life. I passed away the time, having no affliction but what was imaginary, and created my own fancy, as nothing is more common with us women, to be grieving for nothing when we have nothing to grieve for. As I will not engross too much of your paper at once, I will defer the remainder of my story until my next letter. In the meantime, desiring your readers to exercise their patience and bear with my humors, I am not insensible of the impossibility of pleasing all, but I will not willingly displease any. For those who will take offense, where none is intended, they are beneath the notice of your humble servant, Silence Dogood. New England Current, April 12th, 1722. This is Franklin's first big hit as a writer. More letters followed, and the circulation of the New England Current took off. This is a master storyteller, gives us enough detail to make the character seem real. I've abridged it a bit here, but leaves enough ambiguity to keep us guessing and keep us wanting to know more about her, leaving us a mystery to solve. And when we feel we know everything about a character, we become emotionally disengaged, and we lose respect for them and start looking for other mysteries to solve. Here is what another master of narrative said on the subject. Now, Guildenstern, will you play upon this pipe? My lord, I cannot. I pray you. Believe me, I have not the skill. Why, look you now how unworthy a thing you make of me. You would play upon me, you would seem to know my stops, you would pluck out the heart of my mystery, you would sound me from my lowest note to the top of my compass, and there is much music, sweet music, in this little organ, yet you cannot make it speak? Do you think I'm easier to be played on than a pipe? Call me what instrument you will, though you may fret me, you cannot play upon me. Young Franklin teased his audience with dribs and drabs of do-good's life, but always left them eager to come back for more. And come back they did. Switching gears, here we see Franklin's use of irony for effect, admonishing people's flaws while allowing each of them to think that they themselves could not possibly be the subjects of his satire. Rules for the New England Current. To the author of the New England Current, sir, seeing your current is a paper which, like the primitive Christians, begins to be everywhere spoken against, it is our humble opinion that it is time for you to think of some method wherein to carry it on without ministering such occasion of offense to any, especially to the polite and pious people, of whom there are considerable numbers in this land. It is a common saying that it is a bad thing to have a bad name. When a man has once got a bad name, people are apt to misrepresent and misconstrue whatever he says or does, though it be innocent, nay, good and laudable in itself, and though it proceed from a good intention, which is absolutely necessary to denominate any action good. Hence it is that so many good people have entertained strong prejudices against your current, because they say there's no good thing that can come out of that paper. Let a discourse be ever so good, instructive, and edifying in itself, and strengthened by many texts of scriptures and quotations of the works of the most eminent divines who have great names in all the universities of Europe, yet they say it is base and vile, and has a wicked tendency. It is written with bad intention, with a design to mock and deride religion and the serious, conscientious professors of it. Now, though we are of the opinion that this matter has been strained a little too far by persons whose zeal is not sufficiently poised with knowledge and prudence, yet it may be very proper to lay before you some rules which, if duly observed, will render your paper not only inoffensive, but pleasant and agreeable. Our present purpose, therefore, is to suggest several things to you by way of discretion which may conduce to so desirable an end. In the first place, whatever you do, be very tender with the religion of the country which you are brought up in and profess. Next, take great care that you not cast injurious reflections upon the reverent and faithful ministers of the gospel, or any of them. We think New England may boast of an almost unparalleled happiness in its ministers. Take them in general, there is scarce a more candid, learned, pious, laborious set of men under heaven. But though they are the best of men, they are but men at best. And when we hear of the imprudencies of any of them, we should cover them with a mantle of love and charity, and not profanely expose and aggravate them. Charity covers a multitude of sins. Besides, when you abuse the clergy, you do not consult your own interest, for you may be sure they will improve their influence to the uttermost and suppress your paper. Be very general in your writings, and when you condemn vice, do not point out particular persons who have offended the good people and may have occasioned to make great disturbances of their families and neighborhoods. And lastly, beware of casting dirty reflections on the Society of Gentlemen, scoffingly called the Canvas Club. They are truly gentlemen of good credit and reputation, as any we have, and many of them are men of power and influences, and if you offend them, they may contribute a little bit to the crushing of your paper. Thus, we have offered you some plain directions, which if you wisely follow, we doubt not that you will steer clear of the rocks, shelves, and quicksands. This will render your performances both pleasant and profitable, even to persons of a most different apprehension among us. We are your hearty friends and well-wishers, A, B, C, etc. The New England Current, January 28th, 1723. So, there we see the use of satire and the people, I can only imagine most of the people reading the paper are themselves the subject of that satire, but all of them feel that they are partaking in a looking down their nose at their neighbors. Yes, he's talking about that guy over there.
I've moved Franklin to Boston.
We're in Boston.
No, Philadelphia, sorry.
To Philadelphia. Philadelphia, where we have one of the most successful pieces of writing in its time, this from Poor Richard's Almanac. And his employment of the self-aware meta-narrative long before it was popular. Courteous reader, I have heard that nothing gives an author so much pleasure as to find his works respectfully quoted by others. Judge then how much I must have been gratified by an incident I'm going to relate to you. I stopped my horse lately, where a good number of people were collected at an auction of merchants' goods. The hour of the sale not being come, they were conversing on the badness of the times, and one of the company called to a plain, clean old man with white locks, "Pray, Father Abraham, what do you think of the times? Will not these heavy taxes quite ruin the country? How shall we ever be able to pay them? What would you advise us?" Father Abraham stood up and replied, "If you would have my advice, I'll give it to you in short. For a word is wise enough, as Poor Richard says." They joined him in desiring him to speak his mind, and gathering round him, he proceeded as follows. "Friends," says he, "the taxes are indeed very heavy, and if those laid by the government were the only taxes we had to pay, we might easily discharge them. But we have many others, and much more grievous to some of us. We are taxed twice as much by our idleness, 3 times as much by our pride, and 4 times as much by our folly. And from these taxes the commissioners cannot ease or deliver us by allowing an abatement. However, let us hearken to good advice, and something may be done for us. God helps them that help themselves, as Poor Richard says." Richard Saunders, December 28th, 1732. With each of these characters, Franklin has clothed himself in someone unlike himself and presents their views and opinions in such a way that he can feign an objectivity, allowing the reader or listener to enter the story and identify with his invented character. In later years, when Franklin was attempting to influence his own son, he produced his autobiography. While the events of the book are reasonably aligned with Franklin's own life, as our play is reasonably aligned with Franklin's life, the character it depicts is an invented one. The book is not a piece of objective self-examination, but rather intended to instruct an audience, chiefly his son, and draw that audience into Franklin's way of thinking about the world. Later in France, he adopted a different character. Now we saw...
We haven't gotten out of Philadelphia and London yet.
Oh, okay.
You can't go to Paris yet.
Well, we're going there real soon. So can you shift back to that earlier iPad ad there where it shows Franklin?
Okay, you keep talking.
I do not control the video. So we'll look back at a picture of Franklin earlier on when he's as a younger man. Although, keep going. There we are. So
Not younger.
he's younger than he was when he was older. So he lived a very long life. Now let's remember this image and shift ahead to Paris.
Philadelphia is getting very short shrift.
Well, he spent a lot of time here.
I had all the institutions that he started.
Well, yes, there we go. Well, Philosophical Society.
Wait, London?
We're in London.
Oh, that was, yeah, okay.
That scene too.
A revolution? Okay, now we got...
Okay, now here we have Franklin in Paris. Here he has adopted a completely different character. He's roughly 80 years old by this point, and And he appears this way. Completely different character, the simple, homespun American frontiersman, because he judged through observation that the novelty of this persona to the French court gave him a celebrity that was very useful in making connections and undergirding his credibility and effectiveness as a diplomat. So by any objective standard, he was enormously effective in this role, one of the biggest of his life, largely through his ability to accurately assess the character of his audience and choose an effective method of manipulating their emotional engagement with him personally. Character creation, storytelling, acting. All of these things were supported and informed by a lifetime of applying the scientific method. The picture of the man who emerges from all these achievements, and we can go back through the many, that's Treaty of Paris, that's young William Franklin.
That's Temple.
William Temple Franklin, yes.
His grandson.
Scene 6. The picture of the man that emerges from all of these achievements, his writings and his institutional legacies, is at once incredibly detailed and deeply mysterious. We all know of him. For all that we know of him, the man himself is simply a black box. He seems to invite us to project our own finer qualities and imaginations onto him, and we imagine him as anything, but we will never know the certainty of him. As with Hamlet, he is a mystery that every generation is desperate to solve. Franklin's greatest and most indelible creation is Benjamin Franklin himself.